And then I will put myself on spotlight, I think, if I can find where I got to do this. So you'll be able to see me. So how do you like my new iPad? It gives a pretty good close-up of the hook. I like that. So what we're going to tie today is Doc Spratley's, for me anyway. And I'm going to tie two because they're fairly quick and dirty fly to tie. The first one I'm going to tie is on a 2X long hook. And I'm going to tie it with a black body and a silver tinsel. And the second one I'm going to tie on a longer hook, and it's going to be instead, the first one will be the traditional cigar shaped body. And then this one will have a nice long and skinny body. And that one's going to be olive with a gold tinsel. Basic technique is the same. For the black one, I've got black 8/0 thread. So I'm going to start the thread right behind the eye.
Dave, that looks like a substantial metal in that hook.
Yeah, it's a Mustad 9671. So it's a standard wet fly hook. And you want a little weight in them. You want them to go down. These typically, when I would fish these around the Edmonton area, I would use a Type 3 sink and do a slow troll behind the canoe. And I've probably caught more fish around Edmonton with that technique than just about anything else using this fly. So I'll dress the hook with the thread more or less right down to the barb. And then I'm going to, for the tail, you can use grizzly hackle, or what I'm going to use, which is one of the original patterns, is guinea fowl. So that's a guinea fowl. That's a big one. It comes in a package like that with a little bit of neck attached. And the smaller feathers actually get smaller dots. So if you want to use guinea fowl for a nice mottled tail on a nice dry fly, these things work really good. You can get some that have very fine dots on them. Give a little mottling. This is a big one, but I got one here that's little. So normally what I do with this big feather is I'd strip all of the fluff off the bottom and the soft barbs off the side there, and end up with something like that. And to make the tail, I just take I say a little more than a gap width of barbules off the side of the hook, pull them straight out, and then just pull them off the stem. Get a bunch like that. The tail on this guy is going to be maybe a gap length behind the bend. And I'm going to tie it on with a soft loop on top. And not bother trimming the butts. I'm just going to wrap up the shank over top of them, using my thumb and forefinger to hold it on top of the hook. And stop about 2.5 to 3 eye lengths behind the eye. The first one I'm going to use to tie the body is wool, just a couple of strands. It's just basically darning wool. Tie that in right where the thread was hanging at that spot right behind the hook eye, about 2 to 3. And I'll wrap my thread all the way down the shank and get it right to the back. Tie that out of the way. Pardon me. For a rib, I'm using number 14 Mylar tinsel. I'll get a good chunk off here. And the Mylar is silver on one side and gold on the other. So I can use the same spool of tinsel for both colors. Tie the tinsel in at the back, and because I want the silver to be facing out when I wrap forward, I tie it on so that the gold side is facing me when I attach it to the hook. And there's another one of these little tricks. The loop, when I'm trying to use the soft loop, was falling this way. So if I spin my bobbin counterclockwise, then the loop falls the other way. And I wrap this tinsel down with the gold side facing up. And just wrap it right to where I had the tail tied in and put the tinsel at the back. Bring my thread all the way up to the front at that point where the 3 eyelets behind. I'm going to tie a 1/2 inch because I'll use the rotary vise to make this a little easier. Bring my bobbin holder out in front. On this rotary vise, one of the things I can do with it, there's a little adjustment here I can make so that the eye of the thread goes horizontal into the bobbin threader, because I can slide the entire head of the vise up and down to do that, so it doesn't bob up and down when I wind. So to make this this body, this is a twisted wool. Just wind up the shank of the hook in touching turns up to where my thread is hanging.
Please.
And then wind back the same way, all the way back. And when I get towards where the point of the hook is, I'm not going to go all the way to the back. I'm going to start winding forward again, over top. Get not quite to where I stopped at the last time, and I'll wind back again. And then not where I stopped the last time, I'm going to wind forward again. And you'll see what ends up, you end up with a cigar-shaped body, tapered at the back, and maybe not quite so much a taper up at the front. So now I have this kind of fat bulbous body as a result of that process. Tie out the wool. And again, I'm trying to keep the gap between the eye of the hook and the end of the body about 2.5, almost 3 eye widths behind the eye. One of the reasons you do that on this is I'm going to try and leave a bit of a ramp where it's a bit sloped here, where I'm going to tie the wing in. Take my tinsel. Oh, this is, again, one of the beauties of having a rotary vise. I'll tie it another 1/2 hitch here. Stick my thread in the bobbin holder. And I hold on to the silver tinsel. I'll make the first wrap around the back of the hook. And then if I hold this tinsel at about a 45-degree angle and just let it wrap its way up. That didn't work. You try to get, if you do it right, which I'm not. How about that? It works better on the flat body. But if you hold it at the right angle, you get nice, even wraps up the hook. And that's not doing it. So I have to do it by hand. And the sloped body makes it a little harder to do that. There we go. So I'm going to place these wraps by hand. And that's probably a little too many wraps, but with the slope, with the cigar body, it's a lot harder to get even wraps. It tends to want to go the wrong way. Tie it off. And trim the excess, which I'm going to save for the next fly. Get my guinea again. And again, cleaning out some of the stuff. I'll pull about the same amount again, about a gap width off the side. Pull that. And it's a little curved. I'm going to turn the hook. I turn the hook upside down and turn the guinea upside down so it curves, because it's got a bit of a curve to it, so that it curves away from the hook. So my hook is now point up, and I'm measuring just to the point of the hook from the tie-in spot. And hold that in place. Put a couple of wraps and adjust it a bit so that it's in the right spot. And there's my little beard. Come up in front and tie that down and trim the excess out. They're soft fibers, so when you try and use your scissors, they tend to walk away from the points. Bring my thread right back to where I tied those guys in. And I'm going to put the wing on here. And the wing consists of pheasant tail. And the same drill here, I pull about a little more than a gap width. I'd say 1.5 gap widths of fibers, and I pull them straight out from the shank again and pull them off the stem. That keeps the tips even. I measure these guys from right to the tail, end of the tail, do a loose wrap over the top. And the last thing I'm going to do is just do one wrap in behind them to make them stand up a bit. Hold the excess up at a bit of an angle in front so that I can trim them off reasonably short and wrap the little stubs down there. The head of this fly is peacock curl. Bring my thread back to where I tied those in. And where's my peacock? I have some very long peacock curl. And I could probably get some even longer stuff, because the neighborhood peacock was standing on the fence of my neighbor's place yesterday looking at us. I thought, I wonder if I could sneak up behind him and maybe grab some feathers off his tail. Anyway, I just take a couple of strands. I wrap them around the thread so that the tips and the butts are joined, and then bring my thread up and cinch that down on top of the hook. Then wrap my peacock curl clockwise around the thread. The reason for doing this is to reinforce the peacock curl so that if a fish's tooth gets into this, it doesn't unravel on you. And for these wide-bodied hooks, wide-bodied flies, I want to have a little bigger peacock curl head than on the skinny one. And having the thread embedded in the peacock curl means that it won't unravel on me if something gets in there, like a fish tooth. Tie it right behind the eye. Trim it off. And whip finish. This is going to be the interesting part later today when I try to teach the young fellow that I've been teaching last week or so how to tie flies, is teach him how to use a whip finisher. So I do a couple of 3-turn whip finishes. And yeah. That's number 1, Dog Spratley Black. Now you can make that a little bulkier. You could probably put more pheasant tail on there. But I find if you tie it more, it just makes it stiffer, so it doesn't go as well when you're stripping it. It doesn't breathe as well. So the next one is we'll do on the long shank hook, which I've already, this is a 9672, which is a 3X long. The only difference, I'm going to do this in olive. So I have some olive 8/0 and start behind the hook shank and wrap my thread down the shank. With 8/0 hook, it's not, if you hang on to the tag end and just go like that, you don't have to cut the tag end off, it breaks. Right down to the barb of the hook again. And I have this nice package here of olive guinea. So I don't know if you can see the color there. Yeah, there you go. It's a nicer color. Got a little sun peeking through the window today. So the same drill, I'm going to pull a good gap width of guinea out from the side of the stem and try and stroke them out at a right angle to the stem and pull them off. Measure the gap width behind the hook again and tie that back. Bring my thread up to the front. Again, about 3 eye widths behind the eye. This I'm going to use for this, I'm going to use embroidery thread. This is a 4-strand embroidery thread. You can get it at the fabric store, or there's actually a wool shop down on Trounce Alley that carries this stuff in 8,000 colors. It's 4-strand. Now, Florin was saying you can split the thread off and use 2 strands or 1 strand or whatever, but even for this skinny body fly, I'm going to use all 4. Again, got to spin the bobbin to get that loop to fall the right way. And wrap it down to the back of the hook. Right back to where I tied the tail in. Right at the point. And that little bit of tinsel has now disappeared. Oh, there it is. It's on the floor. No, that's not that one. Where'd it go? This is the problem with tying where I am in the living room. I can't see where things go when they fall on the floor. Oh well, where'd my tinsel go? Patience with me. Where'd it go? Where'd the spool go? Ah, there it is. It ran away. Rolling across the carpet. Again, the mylar tinsel. Now this time, because I want the gold to be out as a contrast to the olive embroidery thread, I'm going to tie this in at the back of the hook so that the silver is facing me. And when I finish putting it on top of the hook shank, when I finish tying it onto the hook shank, it's going to end up on top of the hook with the silver facing up. And on the far side of the hook a little bit. Bring my thread all the way up to that 3 eye width place and tie my half hitch. Bobbin holder out of the way. Now the trick with this embroidery thread is as you wrap it, you turn it clockwise every time you wrap over the hook shank with any material, if you go from you're facing you to the other side, over the top and underneath, you will put a one turn counterclockwise twist in the thread, or clockwise twist in the material. So what you want to do every time you go over, you want to do a counterclockwise twist. And what that does is it takes this material, which is normally sort of round with 4 strands, takes that twist out and it makes it flat. So you can see how flat that is. And I just do a very slight overlap. And every time it looks like it's getting too close together, I do that counterclockwise twist to the embroidery thread and just wrap it over. And what that does is if you overlap just the right amount and keep that flat, it makes a nice, flat, even body, skinny body, all the way up the hook shank. And these are just very, like maybe 1 strand overlaps. When I get there, that 3 eye widths behind, I'll tie that off. And wrap it down. Trim the excess. And once again, I'm going to not bother with the rotary. I'm just going to wrap with my fingers. Once again, try to make that angle consistent all the way up the hook shank. And you can see this time around, it's the gold that is facing outward. If I'm careful with, I can get some really nice even wraps on this flat body. Tie off the tinsel. Get that. Use my fingernail to put that tag end down so that it's buried. And turn it upside down. And where'd my green guinea go? There it is. One of the neat things about these guinea fowl is that, as I say, if you get the smaller ones that are down the bottom, they have a lot more and smaller dots. So you can see there's a bit of a difference between them depending on how long the piece of feather is. Pull this out to the side again. Turn it upside down so it curves away from the hook shank, and measure just to the point and tie that in. Pull the front up so I can get at it with my scissors. Trim it up. And get my pheasant tail. Pull off about the same amount as the last time. Get the tips straight out to the side. So they're nice and even. Measure again to the tail, and these are going to be a little longer because that's a long shank hook. Couple of wraps over top. Hold it up. Do a wrap in behind to hold it up. And then wrap in front so that it's locked in. Trim it out. That's about right. And peacock curl. A couple of strands wrapped around the thread at the halfway point. And tie it down on the hook. Clockwise wraps around the thread. And I'll do 5 or 6. And then this head is going to be skinnier because the whole body and the whole fly is skinnier. That in the right spot here. Got one mallard feather out there I'll have to pull off. There. Just trim the last little bit of that peacock out. There's a little trick if you tend to, like I did here, crowd the head a little bit. I use my fingernails and just sneak them around the eye of the hook so that I can get a couple of wraps in there. And whip finish. Get out of there. There we go. And again, do a double whip finish, then I don't need glue. And that's the olive version. It's hard to see the color because the sun is in the way. Don't think you can. I can't get the sun on it. There you go. A little bit of sun on the fly, you can see the color better. So there you go. That's the Doc Spratley. And I need to take the spotlight off. There we go. Any questions?
Dave, I guess if you didn't have guinea fowl, you could use partridge, right?
You could use partridge or even just grizzly hackle.
Yeah.
Anything that's got a little bit of barring on it.
Yeah, the other substitution you can make a little bit is for the wing, pheasant hen tail.
Yeah.
Is a beautiful material for wings on wet flies.
Yeah, it's a lot softer than the regular pheasant tail.
And it's patterned a little bit differently. It's more brown and black rather than this reddish tint you get out of the male pheasant. So if you don't have any hen pheasant tail, there's a good excuse to go out and look for some.
Yeah. So there's the two. And I do like the guinea because if you get the smaller guinea feathers, it has quite a bit of close together small spots, and it gives a really nice appearance to that tail. We'll get it really close here so you can see. So that's him. Now it's Flynn's turn.
Oh, my turn. Oh boy. Okay.
There we go.
So yeah, today I thought I was gonna I kind of promised I was gonna do a bit of like rotary tying and stuff. So here I put up the Norvise, and so I have my two lights on either side, which if I turn on I get a bit too much glare. And so the Norvise is a weird thing because this is the main hook holding part, which is the end that's rotating, and at this end, this is the thread rest. It's just basically it's a post with a little nubby thing on this side where you can hook over your thread. Okay. So that's kind of the general setup of the thing. And today I was trying to set up my camera so that you can actually see the whole vise, the moving part for the rotary tying. So now after showing you the whole setup, and all of this is mounted on a wood board that is then attached to the desk, so at least I can move it from one desk to the other. And the clamps actually come with the lights. They're probably simpler ways of setting this up, but that's kind of what it looks like. The rest of it is the mess on my fly tying desk, so I guess we'll leave it at that. Okay, so I'm going to move this back into a more fly tying friendly position. And okay. So this is one of the, this is the last version of that Medicine May Nymph. So I did a version of it last week, and this is another one. It's, you can get it, it's that book is freely available on the Northern Lights website, the Flies for Alberta. And this particular pattern is called the Baker's Blue. And it's going to be tied on one of these TMCO 200R I-ring hooks. The original pattern calls for some kind of streamer hook, which you don't have. So I'm using this instead. Okay, so to start with, I take my thread, which is black 8/0, attach it to the hook, and then break off the tag, which you can do with 8/0 thread. You can't do that with thicker threads like 6/0 and stuff. Okay, so this should be still visible. And well, I guess I didn't adjust this well enough. Probably need to tighten the vise a little more. Okay, and then I just wrap the thread to the point where I attach the tail by just turning the vise. And the key ingredient, as I pointed out earlier, I think it was Ron Esty that turned me on to this whole business, is this this bobbin. I was looking for a bobbin for rotary tying, and he suggested I try the Norvise. And you know, a year later, here I am. I actually did buy the Norvise. So this is a key ingredient that makes rotary tying infinitely easier. Okay, for the tail is just a little bunch of teal flank fibers, which are also very nicely barred. And these are fairly long tails, so I'm going to go just a little bit under the shank length and attach this nicely. You're a little bit in the curvature of the hook with this, so you kind of have to be careful. Okay, and then a rib goes on, and the rib here calls for some grizzly hackle, and I don't quite have a perfectly looking grizzly saddle. This is a bit of a lighter gray version of it, but as it's going to be trimmed in the end, I don't think it matters that much. Okay, so just attach this nicely here, right in front of the tail. And then I take some floss. This is Unifloss in, whoops, this way, in Silver Doctor Blue. And I actually put it in a bobbin holder. It makes handling floss a lot easier. One of my problems is floss can get frayed a little bit if your fingers are not perfectly smooth. So one way to avoid that problem is to actually put it in a bobbin, so that, you know, it flows through the bobbin tube, and that keeps it from fraying. Okay, so now I'm going to make sure that my floss is tied all the way right in front of the rib. just the hackle, and then just move the thread up front. And here I have to be mindful of the hook point because that's another thing that's going to fray my thread, my floss. Okay, so then I do a one little half hitch here, and then I hang the thread on the post. This is where going rotary really is helpful because you can put down that floss nice and flat and build whatever shape body you're trying to build. All right, so go up front. If this is going a little too flat on you, and sometimes you end up with this problem of separating strands, you can just grab it and go at it again. As you come closer to the point of the hook, you just have to wiggle the floss around. This unifloss is a one-strand floss. It's fairly thin, so that normally for this size, this is a size 10 hook. If I had like the Danville floss, which is 4-strand, I would grab probably 2 or even 3 strands of floss. Okay, so I want slender here, so I'm not going to overdo it, and I'm going to stop at the point where I'm going to begin building the thorax. So just attach the floss. Now again, I could, keeping with the rotary theme, although at this point for the rib, it isn't exactly worth it, but I could do this, right? And this is the challenge here, is if you have ribs and additional materials that you want to leave attached to the hook, then you've got a problem of, okay, you can put the thread out of the way, but the floss is a bit of a separate problem. So I just wrap this at a nice angle. And that's okay in this case. I don't mind adding a little bit of floss in the thorax area because I will have to build up a thorax anyway. So I could just let the floss hang and wrap itself on the hook a little bit. So 2 or 3 turns of thread to secure this hackle. And then just trim it off and put it aside. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to add the back for the thorax. Now I have this rib, this hackle is too long, so I'm going to show you what I need to do with it. Is I am going to zoom in a little bit and maybe turn off one of the lights at least, so you can see a little better what's going on. Okay, so like this. It's a bit white on white here, so it's not very visible. But the main point is this is a little too long, and I just want a rib out of this hackle. Okay, so this is the idea of the gills on the abdomen of a mayfly nymph. Just do a bit of trimming here. Clip it short. Don't want to use your best hackle for this. Okay. So you can see what all that's left here is just this little stubby idea of there being something. And that's really kind of how the gills on these things look like. Okay, and then I'm going to attach a little piece of gray goose. So this is a little slip from a goose feather that I found in the park, while keeping a safe distance away from the geese, of course. So attach this. And then the next thing I want is a hackle for the legs. And this time I'm going to use a grizzly hackle. that's got long enough fibers that are going to look in proportion to what the legs of a nymph like this would be like. Okay. I'm going to attach this at the point where I put in the back, the shell back. Okay, and I'm going to move my thread forward because I need to build a thorax. And again, put my thread out of the way because I'm going to build the thorax using the same floss that I use for the abdomen. Okay, so I start right here at the back and try not to go crowding the eye. And if this is a little too stuck, just pull a little bit on the floss here. Okay. Don't want to go overdoing it either. Whoops. Okay, so the floss is slippery. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back, build up again, and then just stop here and secure it with a thread. Okay. And basically the main point of having a bobbin that automatically retracts is that whenever you put your thread in the thread rest, you can always come back and start winding by hand. So you can always control and maintain a short distance between the tip of your bobbin and the hook. Okay. And then all I need to do is do my legs. So again, I'm going to use hackle pliers because I get a little bit more control that way. And I can just leave now. I don't need to bother with the thread rest because a few extra wraps of thread at the eye of the hook are not going to hurt anybody. Okay. So I do a few wraps of hackle here, not an excessive amount. Remember, these are just the legs for the nymph. Secure well at the front, clip. Now take a look at this before putting on the shell back. You have two choices, right? You can just press all these hackle fibers down and then try to fold them back. Or you could say, well, you know what? That's just, insects only have 6 legs, not 16,000. So just go and trim that top and then fold back the goose. Okay. So once you folded back the goose, you're basically done. You just have to push this hackle back a little bit so it doesn't get in the eye of the fly. I just pull with my fingers a little bit, you know, using a little webbier rather than very stiff dry fly hackle would also help in this kind of situation. And then before I cut this slip of goose off, I just fold it back a little bit and then I trim it before I do the whip finish. This way it's properly locked in. Take the whip finisher, couple of whip finishes, and bang, we are done. So that's the fly. Okay, this is the baker's blue, and I'm sorry today I can't seem to be getting my lighting to work quite right. Okay, so this is what the fly looks like, and I haven't tried it yet. People who have fished this say it's a really great pattern. And they all, like I said, they pulled out their silver Dr. Blue floss. They had it very close at hand, which tells me that they probably like to tie this fly quite frequently. So there it is. And to end with the Jasper flies, I'm going to finish off with that Palmer fly that I think I'm going to ask Dave, or maybe I'll just post the recipe afterwards, because it's a really simple fly, and now that I have the rotary set up to go, I can do that really quickly. But before I do that, I should pause here for a moment and see if there are any questions regarding this Baker's Blue. I take it that there are no questions. I hear nothing. I'll let you know once I catch monster fish with them in Medicine Lake. You'll be the first ones to know. Okay, this Palmer fly is size 10 and 12, and it calls for 2 ingredients other than thread. A little bit of dyed mallard flank in a wood duck color, and a little bit of badger hackle, which is for the palmering, which is a little bit of a golden badger hue, so not very, very white, a little bit goldish. And I did tie a few of this thing, so I do have a few bits of hackle already set up here. I don't know if the camera doesn't quite show the color, but you can see it's not white. It's a little bit of a darker creamy color. Okay, so this is extremely simple. It's basically just attach the thread to the hook. Okay, bring the thread to the back, and I'm just using basic black thread, nothing fancy here. Take a little bit of this mallard for a tail. Like this. And this is obviously way too long. You want to do this, the pattern from what I can see calls for a slightly longer tail. So this is more of a nymphal shuck kind of thing. You tie a relatively long tail for this thing. Trim. Then take the hackle. And again, my standard procedure with the hackle, I just go here at the tie-in point and trim off a couple of millimeters off that feather. So I end up with a comb-like little end, which is what I'm going to securely attach to the hook shank. Okay. Once I attach that, I move my thread to the front. Basically, the underbody of this fly is simply going to be the thread and nothing else. Secure the thread at the end with a knot. Put the thread in the thread holder, and then again, it's easier. I could do this with the fingers, but I find I can get a lot closer and I have a lot better control with hackle pliers. So now I'm going to wrap the hackle starting at the end, and being really careful not to catch the point of the hook. And now I can go in really nice, closely spaced turns and build up the body of the fly. And as you can see, I got a little greedy here, and I came in a little, should have probably attached my hack a little bit closer to the tip. Okay, so now I came to the eye of the hook. A couple of turns of thread. Maybe 3 if I'm paranoid. I don't want to lose this wrapped hackle now. And then just slide in my scissors there and trim it. Okay, and that's basically the fly. Now I just pull back a little bit on the hackle, build a little bit of a head, do 2 whip finishes, and done. Now, this is an older book from a time where I got the pattern from, and at that time it was pretty much standard, from what I could see, to use up-eyed hooks for dry flies. And unless you have some old stock of hooks, up-eyed hooks are really hard to come by these days. Okay, so what I'm using instead to approximate that a little bit is a ring eye hook, which is a dry fly hook. This is the Tiemco 101. And some people argue that now this is a size 12, so in this case wouldn't be relevant, but some people argue that when you go to smaller flies, 16s, 18s and below, going with a hook of this style gives you a wider gap and better hooking. So they recommend, if you do small dry flies, to use something like this if you don't have some of those up eye hooks. Okay, so that's why I was using this Tiemco 101. And yeah, they're a little expensive, but how many of these dry flies are you going to be tying anyway? So this is I don't know if this is reasonably visible, or I should enlarge it a little bit more. This is what the fly looks like.
Just take a piece of white paper and put behind it.
Yeah, well, there's some styrofoam, but it's not really.
No,
it's not really
reflecting,
doing.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a combo of colors, because that badger hackle is not.
Yeah, it's a very delicate fly.
It's a bit of a delicate fly, yeah, and this is kind of what it looks like in profile. So it's a very simple palmer. There's nothing to it. You just wrap a hackle after attaching a tail, right? It doesn't get. I guess it does get simpler than that. You could just wrap a hackle. Right, even the Griffith's gnat is not simpler, because first you put the peacock and then you put the hackle.
And then you wrap the hackle. Yeah.
So that's that. And with this, I have finished covering. Oh, and I did some variations of this, by the way. I tried to do, if you're nervous about the hackle being a little fragile, you can add in a rib before you tie the hackle, and then weave your rib through the hackle forward and reinforce it that way. That would be another thing that you may want to consider. Just leaving a little tag of thread, for example, would do that, or use a strand of floss or some other material. I use some sparkly thread, for example, and it gives kind of a nice little sparkle in between the hackle fibers. That was kind of a neat effect. So anyway, this is the last of the flies from the book on fishing jasper. So this way I figured I get these out of the way now and can tie something else next time.